Hi, I'm Ernie Conover. Welcome to my shop. In this Woodworker's Journal article, we are covering the making of a basement bowling set aimed at children, but good for kids of all ages. It's based on an antique set my wife bought me as a present some years ago. In this video, I'd like to show you two ways of turning the balls for this set. The original set has 3 balls in it, and they're actually not very accurate at all. They're more like watermelons, really. They're longer than they are round. And they were turned between centers. You can actually see flat spots where the center marks were, and they simply sanded them out. The fact that it's not very round doesn't seem to really affect the game very much. The kids have just as much fun, and actually the balls go about as straight as if they were perfectly round because of Newton's first law of motion. Object in motion tends to stay in motion on a given course. All right, I turned our cylinder round to 2 3/4 inches, and I've taken a 3-inch chunk of it here and chucked it between centers. It runs nice and true, as you can see. And I laid out a 2 3/4 inch circle on a piece of cardboard, but the center of the circle is out about here. So this is just a portion, or less than half the circle. But it becomes a template that I can put down here to judge whether I've got the right arc or not. The main tool for this is a spindle gouge, and we're just going to cut a very large bead here. There, you can see that we've got a pretty accurate sphere here. And with some coarse sandpaper now, we can bring that right into the correct shape. We'll now just turn this around this way, and we can get rid of most of this nubbin here with a parting tool. And there, we actually have a pretty accurate gaming ball here, as you can see that I can come right around this, and it's pretty darn spherical in all directions. And I can quickly chisel / sand this off by hand, and I'm left with a pretty good gaming ball. It'll actually roll quite straight, and the kids will have just as much fun as if it was perfect. All right, our second method by which we'll make pretty much a perfect sphere. I have another chunk of our piece of wood that is 2 3/4 inches in diameter and about 3 inches long. I have mounted just a piece of maple on a faceplate. I've drilled a hole through it so that I could get a knockout bar through here. And I've scraped a hole in it, or a recess, with this, what's called an armrest, an ancient turning tool. And I've come in here and I've turned a bore that's tapered inward. It's smaller at the bottom than it is at the top. And I can just fit that in there, and it wants to grab. And to make sure it does, I wipe this with a little bit of blackboard chalk, which is just like chalking a pool stick. So I've put that in there, and I just turn this over by eye, and I can see it's furthest away here, so I'm going to strike on this side like that. Running nice and true now. I've touched that with the tip of this compass, and I'm setting the compass to the radius of this piece, which is right about there. And I'll now set off what I call the equator. That's the middle of our ball that we're going to turn. I will now take the spindle gouge again, and I'm going to turn this off like this. Not horsing this very much, I'm letting the tool do the cutting. Coming right up on the equator now. The idea is for us to have an arc that is really outside of our circle. This template we made before is actually fairly handy in here. And that's about the shape I want it. We've knocked that out of the chuck, and we now have to chuck it in this direction, and I'm going to have to clean out some material in here so that can happen. So I'll take my armrest and my scraper. Perfect. I have my equator right there. Now I watch the equator and I can tell exactly where to hit. There, I have the equator running perfectly now. And I'll get out my compass again, and I'm going to set the length of the ball in the other direction. And I can take a parting tool and simply cut this off to that length. Back to our spindle gouge, and we're going to make another ellipse outside of a sphere. Shut it off. We'll now knock it out of the chuck again to use my super long knockout bar. I've now turned this really 90 degrees of the chuck so that the equator is running between centers. And by touching a pencil there, I've got a perfect dot right on the equator line, and so I know I'm running true. And because we have a perfect sphere here at the equator, a perfect circle, I should say, when we turn this, that generates a sphere. And if we now take and bring our tool rest in and take a big square end scraper and just very carefully and very lightly scrape off the ghost that I see looking back there, I will end up with a perfect sphere. And I want to get this area true first, because if I do lose this, my chucking, I will have brought this perfectly round, and I will be able to turn it and get a better chucking the next time. And as you can see, it's coming round, but until I touch the equator, it isn't really a ball. And there we have 1/2 of a ball. What I'm going to do is put a couple of pencil lines here to let me turn this around and get it running true when I turn the other half of it. So I'll simply knock it out of the job. Turn it around. I'm going to get a better hold this time because I do have a perfect sphere. And by lining up one of those equal pencil lines, I can get it into the chuck pretty square. There. I've got my pencil line running true right there. I can come in and simply scrape the other half of this one. There we are. We pretty much have a perfect sphere at this point. And that was an exceptionally good gaming ball. The sanding of this is pretty easy. It's important to use coarse sandpaper, about 80 grit. And if you don't start with pretty coarse sandpaper, you will actually sand the ball out around because you'll attack the plank grain faster than the end grain of the ball. You can actually, if it isn't absolutely perfect after scrapers, you can actually sand it into round by turning it frequently at just random ways. There, our finished miniature bowling ball. Have fun with this, and by whatever method you do it, be safe. And this is Ernie Conover saying thanks for visiting my shop.